We have today with us Ambassador Carsten Stauer. Carsten became the chair of the Development Assistance Committee, DAC, of the OECD early 23. And as we all know, DAC is the most important platform of providers of official development assistance, ODA. So, Carsten, what is the most important challenge you were dealing with since you took over early 23 the DAC chair role?
Well, of course, there has been many challenges, but I think the most important was that we are in a situation where the world is not at a very good spot. Things are going down, things are going backwards. We see setbacks. The UN had this conference on the SDGs, which showed that only 12% were on track to be achieved by 2030. So we see serious concerns of economic crisis, debt crisis, lack of debt sustainability, food crisis, energy crisis, part of it inflicted by COVID-19. A lot of things that are going in the wrong direction. Trade, not that good spot either. Deglobalization, self-sufficiency, strategic autonomy, a lot of things where you see that the framework that we have known for many years, at least since the end of the Cold War, is now a little bit crumbling. And in that context, how do we provide aid? How do we contextualize ODA in a way that makes sense, that actually helps stem the negative development and maybe offer some positive development instead?
The DAC created the gold standard for development cooperation or foreign aid, ODA. And ODA is about economic development and welfare of developing countries. When I'm looking at reality, what aid is doing for the last couple of years, it's very much about geopolitics, geo-economics. ODA became the most important source for international climate finance, so not at least mitigation, and also to some extent an instrument for migration management. Do you see any kind of conflicting interest between the gold standard and this new and quite massive trend?
I think that you have two different trends you talk about. When you talk about migration, I don't think that you will find much ODA involved in migration. You can say that a lot of ODA maybe have as a goal to stem migration in order to create alternatives in countries that will make it less important for people to migrate. But that's not a deviation from the classical goal of ODA. I think when you talk about climate change, it's a different issue. The Paris Agreement is in that sense, our gold standard. We need to go to net zero. We need to stay within 1.5 degrees by 2100. And ODA is going to help that. We had a declaration adopted by DAC in 2021 that said that we should align as far as we could our development cooperation, our development system, our ODA, with the Paris Agreement. And that means, of course, that we try to be helpful through our ODA in actually achieving the Paris Agreement goals. We have been doing that, and we've been monitoring that, and hopefully we'll have another report out in the autumn before the next COP29 in Baku that will illustrate that an increasing share of ODA is actually also targeted to stem climate change. So you have a double goal here, a double achievement, a double ambition, which is to both to alleviate poverty, to create more inclusion, less inequality, and at the same time to further the advancement towards net zero. There will be a report out next month from the OECD that actually tries to link those two, the climate change agenda and the development agenda, saying that we can actually get 3 out of 3. We can both reduce emissions, and we can reduce poverty, and we can reduce inequality if we make those ambitions work together.
Okay, so we have those co-benefits. Can you think about situations where we provide international climate finance without those co-benefits?
Of course you can, but I think in most cases, if you are wise in how you mitigate, even if you talk about mitigation, if you are a small island state and you are dependent on fossil fuels, if you then transition to a green economy, to wind or to solar, that is, of course, mitigation, because you move from an economy that's based on emissions to one that is not. At the same time, it makes you more independent. It makes you be able to have more budgetary security and safety on your budgets. And it creates jobs in a way that the fossil fuel economy does not do. So it's not difficult to see that these things can work together.
How do you look at this kind of geopolitical trends that ODA is used for geopolitical purposes? For example, looking at the EU and the Global Gateway Initiative?
There have always been a political aspect of ODA. ODA has always been part of foreign policy instruments. Go back to the Cold War and you will find something that is totally different from it has been in the last 3 decades or more, where ODA was actually an instrument in the Cold War. This is not the case anymore. And it will not be the case either, because we are not in a situation where, as donors, we can come to a country and say, you should only work with us, not with anybody else. That was possible in the 1960s, perhaps, or in the early 70s. It is not possible today. Our partner countries have the voice, they have the agency, they have the authority to decide. They would work with us if what we come with is good for them, and as it should be. And they would work with other providers, other partners, if what they come is good for them, as it should be. So I think we are, to a certain degree, in a situation of more competition. You can say it's geopolitics, but it's also a more competitive environment. And what we can offer, I think, we have a good offer as Western donors, as ODA providers, because we can actually offer things that will help create reforms, that will help countries to achieve economic growth and welfare, and that will help also hopefully their democratic development and their agency for their people in a way that will be helpful for the longer term social and political development of those countries.
If you look for us in the crystal ball, how is ODA looking like in 5 years from now?
It's difficult to say, because of course we have a discussion in many countries about the ODA levels. How much should we still be engaged in global issues? I think there is a valid case for saying and for having a political discourse, not least in Europe, that says that we have an interest in the wider world, not only in ourselves or in our close vicinity. So we have interests that are more than just a regional one, more than just dealing with Russia, more than just dealing with security threats from Russia, which are serious and which we need to deal with. But the world is bigger than that. So we need to have a global view. We need to look at, not least on the situation in Africa, and help our African friends and partners in their struggle to achieve growth and welfare. But we also need to have, I think, a bit of a wider time perspective. Not everything is today or tomorrow. There's also a day after tomorrow. And I think ODA is very much built in a construction where we're looking at the global picture and then the longer term picture. And we know from all our day-to-day experience that action today is often much cheaper than action in 1 year's time or in 2 years' time. If we deal with problems when they emerge, before they grow too big, and with challenges once they're in their early years, we have a bit better chance to be effective, and then we can also do it in a way that for the global environment, the global community and the global economy will be cheaper.
At the moment, your committee has 32 members. OECD has in total 38 members, and we expect that more countries will join, not at least Brazil, not at least Indonesia, and Thailand might be also a future OECD country. Would you like to see all OECD countries to become also a member of the DAC?
I would really like to see all OECD countries become members of the DAC. I know that anything you say before a but, you negate in the discussion, but I will still say I would like to see them all become members of the DAC. But you also know that there is a history to the DAC, and there is a commonality of identifying as a donor. And some of these members, and you mentioned some Latin American countries have been members of OECD for a long time without joining DAC. They come from a different tradition of helping other countries than is the DAC tradition. So they are coming from a South-South cooperation background. They do a lot of interesting work. We have meetings with them in a few days' time, actually, in Madrid, with the Latin American providers, for instance, of aid. But they work in a different way. We can learn a lot from each other, and we can cooperate a lot. But they do not necessarily see themselves as donors in the DAC tradition of agreeing to the 0.7% target as the standard to which to look, and as the commitment that they have undertaken. So there's a history in this. There's a history in why DAC has the members that it has. But there's also, I think, an open field for collaboration between DAC and other providers that we really want to pursue in the years to come.
So based on what you are saying, to have South-South cooperation providers as potential future DAC members would also mean to rethink the gold standard ODA?
I think we can learn from each other. Whether they become DAC members, whether they become observers, participants, partners of the DAC, that's a minor issue. I think we should work together. And we have an interest. We had a meeting last month in early May in Kuwait with Arab donors, Arab funds and Arab governments. And that's a lot of things that we can learn from each other. We can work together. A lot of the Arab investments in Africa, a lot of that is actually growing quite significant now. And some of these funds are really important and significant providers of aid. They're not DAC members and will not be DAC members, but they report to OECD, they benefit from the collaboration with the DAC. They're very interested in all the instruments that we have provided and developed over 60 years of development cooperation that actually makes aid better. So we can all learn to improve, and I'm sure that there's also elements in South-South cooperation or in triangular cooperation that we can all benefit from. So I think it's a marketplace of ideas and institutions and ways of collaborating where we can benefit from each other. And I think that's the important thing, and that's what we want to build up in the years to come.
China has become a global development player, Belt and Road Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and we have even more initiatives, and China is visible in developing countries, at the United Nations, elsewhere. What would you define a good relationship between the DAC, its members, and China when it comes to development topics?
I think that there is a number of ways where it's possible to work together. I know that the Chinese authorities have been interested in, for instance, learning from the OECD about evaluation systems and techniques. How do you create an evaluation system that actually works and brings back the results and the recommendations from what you have done, and so that it can inform on future development operations. I think that is really, that's real, and we can benefit from each other. I have no problem working with China in a number of areas, and we all, of course, are working together in a number of areas. It's very clear that what I would like is maybe for the Chinese to be a little bit more transparent in what they're doing. I think that what characterizes the DAC is a high degree of transparency, a high degree of openness, basically on what we're doing and how we're doing it. I would hope that other providers, including China, would be as transparent in what they're doing and have maybe a bit more transparency in what is concessional aid and what is commercial loans, and where are their activities and how do they actually engage, what kind of strategies do they really want to work on. That's something we can discuss, and I'm really open to that kind of discussion.
With regard to transparency, China joined at the end of 2022 for the first time the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation meeting, the high-level meeting in Geneva. Is this also a window of opportunity to discuss transparency topics or issues?
Definitely, and I think that we really appreciated that Chinese participation, and we want to work with China on aid effectiveness. There's now a monitoring exercise going on in TPDC. We will get the results of that in 2026. That is led by the partner countries themselves. They will have they'll be at the center of the table when all partners discuss what effective development cooperation is and how it can translate into activities at country level. And of course, China is more than welcome there, as are all other partners. I think what's important, again, the partner countries are in the driver's seat. They are the ones that define the strategies, the policies, the objectives of the development cooperation, and we are partners in that. From the OECD, from the DAC, but also from other countries, from South-South providers, from China and so on. We're all partners in that endeavor, and we are there to try to help our partners achieve the goals that they set. Mm-hmm. We know that economic growth is important. Countries will not thrive without economic growth. They all need to increase the welfare of their citizens. We also know that that growth has to be green. It has to be just. We will not survive with everybody in the world consuming in the same way as any European does it today. So there has to be changes, and that is part of the agenda of development cooperation. That, again, coming back to, we can actually achieve both to get out of extreme poverty, to reduce inequalities, and to secure the environment and in a way that will allow us to transition to a net zero economy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you.